So Jon, welcome to Adventures in Messaging today. Thanks for being here.
Emma, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Jon, we've had a lot of conversations about messaging over the past few months. And one thing you said, which totally resonated with me, is this idea of, as a product marketing team, we can't fall in, or as a company, right? We can't fall in love with the words we come up with inside the building, right? This idea of just taking these words that sound good to us and taking it out to market and just assuming it's right. And I know you've built up your career in the enterprise side of things, enterprise messaging. And so, what do we do? How do we stop falling in love with the messaging inside the building? And how do we make sure that the story we take to the market is really going to resonate with our target audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been pretty lucky in that I've worked with some great people over the years and been a part of some great companies and picked up some best practices. So I think the way that I think of the world and like how a bill becomes a law or the work stream is, everything falls out of the positioning statement. And I think the first thing to sort of clarify for people is positioning doesn't equal messaging, right? Positioning is the way I think about it is what you tell yourself. When the bright lights are on inside the building. This is about how you articulate your strategy, company strategy, product strategy to say, here's who we are, here's what we do differently than other folks out there in the market, and here's how it helps people. And that's never meant to be messaging. It's always meant to be sort of a clarifying kind of North Star for this is what we're doing. I think from that, always think of it as draft and hypothesis and take much more of a iteration hypothesis. I was pretty lucky. I came up as a product manager really early in my career, and somebody explained to me, like, part of your job as a product manager, I don't really care what you think. I care what you're able to synthesize from market research, customer quotes, but your opinion is less important than your ability to pull this stuff together. So it's always sort of stuck with me. So I always think of like that first draft of messaging that's done inside the building that includes all the biases, that includes all the things that people sort of anchor on. Treat it like a hypothesis. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. And then how do you add rigor to it? And you mentioned before, in my career, I've been pretty anchored in not only enterprise software, but like the very kind of technical back end selling technical stuff for technical people in enterprise software. So there are a couple of things that may not apply if you're in kind of traditional B2C or even in other areas of B2B where it might be a little bit more focused on the information worker than kind of the super technical user and persona. But in my mind, and one of them, sort of coming pretty recently, I think there's sort of four almost sort of gauntlets you should run that messaging through in terms of stress testing them and really validating them and doing them in parallel. And then sort of your job as a product marketer, sort of the messaging guru, is to listen and synthesize and test and kind of triangulate or quadrangulate, if there's four of them, to kind of come together with the best solution. And I think there's two that are very specific to enterprise software. I'll start there, and then we'll talk to the ones I think are a little bit more broadly applicable. The first one is the most recent innovation, and I feel like it's such a gimme. It's like finding gold in your backyard. Is read RFPs, right? So request for proposals, RFPs, they're super standard, especially in enterprise software, especially when you're selling into like the CIO or big IT. Analyst firms like Gartner, that's why the Magic Quadrants exist. So they essentially create the criteria, and then you get RFPs based on the criteria in the Magic Quadrant. But the great thing about RFPs is you don't have to guess what customers are looking for. They're telling you. They're asking for it. You get to hear their language. How do they articulate this capability? How do they articulate, they care about X and not Y? And it's just like free market research, customer research of amazing depth that just floats onto the shore. And so I've started to get into just reading all the RFPs and getting my team, all the PMMs to like get familiar with the RFPs, read the RFPs. And then one thing we do at Relic and we've done at other places is we kind of produce a sort of golden RFP response. And so there's a sort of a database of saying, when you ask for this, you don't have to come up with an answer like, here's the answer that PMM will sort of pre-build for you. So RFPs is the number one thing. It's just, there's so much gold in there. And I wish I'd figured that out 10 years ago, but I'm relatively late to the game there. I think the second piece that's super valuable is the analyst community. And I think, I live in a world where some of the Gartners and the Forresters and the IDCs and the 451s are super important. Red Monk, if you're really focused on developers. And, a lot of times I think product marketing organizations or just companies in general use the analysts as too transactional. Like we're pitching them all the time, like the press, versus building a relationship. And I think AR is a very slow twitch muscle. A lot of times, especially in the area where I am, where there's so much technology change and revolution and growth that you have to take a long view in some of these discussions. And I think the most important thing is, all these analysts sit in these seats because they have some level of expertise as researchers, or a lot of them are practitioners. There's a lot of kind of go between the analyst communities and product marketing and product management leaders. So a lot of times they could have had your job at another company. So listen to them. And so rather than, in the Gartner terminology, do a briefing and pitch them all the time, do inquiries and say hey, here's my hypothesis. What do you think? And I always try to think of if I'm going to talk to them for, if I'm going to have a 30-minute call, I only want to talk for 8 to 10 of those minutes. I don't want to listen for 20. And I think that becomes super important. I just don't think people ask, people don't ask enough those open-ended questions of analysts. And I think it's an important input to get. You have to triangulate that with everything else, but it's important. So those are the two that I think are really focused from an enterprise software standpoint to sort of really kind of pressure test that hypothesis. The other two I think are more broadly applicable, and I think people do them to varying degrees. The first one is kind of traditional panel-based market research, super important. You need to make a part of it is, again, this part of that hypothesis is, who are these people? Are you talking about the problems in the same way? So you make sure you methodically step through. Are you paneling the right people? If you're selling CRM software and you bring in the CISO, that's not really the person who's, they might have opinions, but you have to get that mix right. So that's all part of the setup. But once you have the panel together, you make sure you say, hey, these are the problems we think you have. Start with their problems or initiatives or big priorities, not your product. Make sure that matches. Make sure that you talk about that becomes really important. That's an important part of messaging, is setting up the problem statement. You may have a view inside the building of the problem statement that's different from how a lot of your customers have. And I think that's a good way to articulate it. And then when you start to talk through the solution of, well, how would you think about a solution that did A, B, and C? Even maybe abstract away your brand. Don't even say which company it's coming from. Then you can start to get some feedback and make sure that those conversations become more open-ended. So again, you give those kind of prospects or ideal customers an idea to essentially hand you messaging or hand you ideas to go into messaging. So I think that's a really important thing. The important thing is, again, it's critical in the front end to, in the hypothesis, articulate who those folks are and what problems they have, get them in the door, and then again, do more listening than talking. And then the last thing, the sort of fourth leg of the, I guess it's not a stool, a chair.
It's a chair, yeah.
Yeah. The fourth leg of the chair, or the backless chair, which I guess is a stool, I don't know, is actually talking to customers as part of some sort of beta or early access program or limited availability release program. I think too often people think about early access programs, especially in enterprise software, as around technical validation. Does this work? Does this meet their needs? Does it create any environmental issues? But I think there's huge benefit to just making sure that somebody on the marketing side, probably presumably the PMM, is sitting there from the get-go and say okay, why would what problems are they trying to solve? How to, it's the same thing. What language are they using to articulate these problems? And again, listen more than talk, and take that as another input. And then then you do your messaging magic from a synthesis standpoint of, take that early positioning, take that sort of early hypothesis that includes all the biases, and then, input all these other things. And I think that's how, the messaging that has led to the most successful, particularly product launches, have adhered to that discipline. It's a discipline though. It's not, it is not ad hoc. It's not a fire drill. And so if you build it like a machine, you will get the benefits of it.
So Jon, word on the street in the community is that you're known for decrying a sacred term in tech. Would you mind sharing a bit about that?
Yeah, when my career is over, if there was sort of a career tombstone for me, all I want the inscription to be is he rid the world of on-premise. That's all. That's my goal. That's what I'm doing in enterprise software. That's all I care about. A premise is an abstraction. An argument can have a premise. Premise is a tract of land at a place. There could be a dog on premises. You could build a data center on premises. They're not related. They're not plurals of or singular examples or cases of each other. They're completely different words, and I'm always shocked and surprised. And it's sort of been a thing, going back to, I was at Microsoft in the late aughts, sort of when cloud started to become a thing, and Azure was a thing, and I was part of the team in what used to be called the server and tools division, and kind of pitching that all the time. And so whenever I'd work with keynotes with executives, it's like, nope, it's not on premise, it's on premises, and it just became that's sort of my OCD mission in life, and I've kind of carried it through my career to the point where when I first joined New Relic about 18 months ago, that was one of the first things I did. I went to the style guide and I was like, I need edit access to the style guide. We need to wipe on-premise from all places where we communicate to the market. So that's just a little thing. It's, for all, in a world with, in an engineering world where precision matters and concrete matters, like language matters too. And it's my mission in life.
Thank you, Jon, for continuing to fight the good fight for all of us English majors who have found ourselves in the tech marketing world. So thank you.